Hello, everybody. Tonight we are talking about instructor certification, a first step toward leadership. We're going to have Jamie Gissel and Bill Forster, a Wild Bill Brasky, online as well. And we're going to have a conversation how instructor guides or instructor certification courses are failing in our creation of instructors. We're also going to be discussing how instructor training should be the first step towards leadership. We have a lot of opinions about this. It's going to be pretty active in our conversation, and we may or may not have an extra person pop in tonight to assist with the conversation. So, first off, this is something that I've been pretty passionate about. If any of y'all are familiar with the article I wrote and posted on my website, letneck.com, I did a thorough evaluation of Texas's mandated instructor certification course. Now, they call it an instructor guide. They say that this is what you have to have in there. Here's some stuff that we'd like to have in there, but you can pretty much make the course whatever you want. I went through and analyzed the entire thing, and I've had other people offer to do so as well. I got somebody saying that there's no audio. Jamie, Bill, can you hear me?
I got audio on your way. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Jamie, you good?
I'm good.
Yep, got you. I don't know what to tell you, Scott. Um, so that's what we're leading off from tonight. I've been through a lot of instructor courses. I know that Bill and Jamie have been through a lot of instructor courses. We all have pretty strong opinions about it, and I think we all pretty much agree that there needs to be a lot more done in instructor courses to actually create what I call in one of my classes instructor leaders, not just instructor managers. So, real quick, Bill, Jamie, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, my first instructor course was NRA. I think a lot of guys, a lot of cops, one of their first instructor courses are going to be NRA firearms training. My next one was simunitions. I went through the simunitions safety instructor course, safety and just simunition instructor course. I went through a third party course. Commonwealth of Virginia does not have a mandated instructor course, at least they didn't when I went through. So there was a third party individual who came in from out of state that provided the class. I've evaluated a lot of instructor courses. I've taken some corporate civilian instructor courses, as well as I went through a military instructor course just to see what they're doing as part of my role working for the Defense Department. And it's pretty amazing the wide variety. And I've seen just in the last 25 years how a lot of instructor courses have changed, but I don't believe for the better. Number one, there's tons of stuff in an instructor course that doesn't need to be there. I think a lot of instructor courses are more public speaking courses than they are anything else, but there's a lot more involved in being an instructor than just public speaking. We should all agree with that. That shouldn't be a very controversial thought. The other thing that I think is interesting is that my experience with a lot of courses in evaluating them now, and I've recently evaluated 3 from different states, including Texas. You know, a couple of years ago, I'm not going to name a lot of these states because some may have changed since then. But there was one instructor course I evaluated several years ago, I think in 2022, where it was 3 weeks of training, but they had like maybe 3 days of actually talking about what it is to be an instructor, 2 hours on how to create curriculum. The rest of it was what is, welcome, Pat. Pat's finally been able to get into one of our lives. He's been fighting it for the last 3 weeks. So the thing that was most amazing is that it was 2.5 weeks of increasingly longer presentations, and that was it. But if you read what was in there, they didn't cover any of the things that instructors actually do. How do you deal with behavioral issues? How do you deal with, how do you create metaphors? How do you create similes? How do you break things down and create opportunities for people to understand? if you don't know the material and your materials aren't quality, as the state's course was, and a lot of their other training was, there's not a lot of ways of actually training people. It turns into more people faking their way through a Socratic method, drill instructor like attitudes where they're just yelling at people, shaming
Mhm.
people for not being smart or speeding up. And it all is counterproductive and counterintuitive to just learning science. I don't know any kids in school that when you yell at them for not being able to 4 plus 4, they're going to suddenly realize it. That's how my father, taught me math. If I didn't understand it, if he yelled harder, if he got angrier, suddenly I'm going to understand faster. You know, and another situation, I saw this woman trying to talk to some Japanese. The Japanese kept saying, "No, no, I don't speak English." So she just spoke slower and louder. How many times have we seen instructors do that in class? So somebody says, I don't understand that. And what you end up having is if you create a toxic environment in a classroom, because the only experience you have is past experience, then you're going to miss a lot of people who aren't understanding. You're not going to be able to grasp that. Just being able to make a metaphor. If somebody doesn't understand something, being able to break it down into a story or a simile or something like that, just using different ways of conversating. How many classes, instructor classes, did you do improv? I think that's something that Bill and I talked about recently, was adding improv to interrogation training. Well, what about doing improv in an instructor course where you have people go around and they have to add to a story and it gets them thinking, gets them acting, and trying to predict what they're going to say as somebody else is saying something. And probably the biggest number one thing is I have yet to see, other than my own, and this is I'm blowing my horn, other than my own class, I've never seen an instructor course that covered managing scenarios and how to debrief scenarios. But how much training are we asking people to do scenarios without any experience other than the crap scenarios they went through? All we're doing is recycling the same cesspool. All we're doing is sucking from the honey pot and putting it back into the toilet, thinking that we're accomplishing something. We're not cleaning the system. So I'm very passionate about it because I've been asked to contribute to a state who's rewriting their instructor material. And when I go through and read it, I was like, you don't need a lot of this. We don't need to talk about andragogy. A week-long instructor certification course is not a mini BS in education. And in actuality, a lot of research is showing that andragogy and pedagogy are the same thing. That learning is learning regardless of the age and regardless of the situation. The methods for learning might differ based on the ages and the industry that you're working. And so we have to start looking at redoing our instructor training. And it starts not from sitting down around a table saying, I think we should have this, I think we should have that. But all the problems we have in instructor certification training comes from one problem. And that is none of it is based on a performance task analysis. Nobody is going out and watching and evaluating and analyzing what instructors are doing in a classroom, what they have to do to prepare to be in a classroom, what the materials look like inside a classroom, and then designing training on the tasks. If you want to talk about andragogy, that's great. And for those of you who don't know, andragogy is considered adult learning. Pedagogy is childhood learning.
Thanks for that because you went way over my head with those big words.
Just throw up your hand. Hey, you're talking a lot of technical stuff. You're starting to sound like you can start talking about neuroscience and
I got
plasticity
enough
and crap.
PTSD in my brain. I don't know what those big words are.
That's the look I saw. You're sitting there. You're sitting there having flashbacks. It's like
Yeah,
he's speaking Chinese.
yeah.
Yeah. So andragogy is in the education world. It's adult learning. So you want to talk about andragogy? That's great. Make it an instructor development course after certification. If you want to talk about like my instructional design for law enforcement or advanced course design is what I'm calling it now, which is what the book Creating Training for Law Enforcement is based off of. That can be an instructor development course after a week of This is how you run a scenario. This is how you set up a room. This is how you deal with behavioral issues. This is how you treat adults, not like boots, not like 12-year-olds. If we don't change how instructor training is done from the get-go, all we're doing, like I said, is recycling the same shit through the cesspool, through the plumbing, and through the toilet. So I'm going
I
to take a
think
beat so it's not just me.
I think you're exactly right. You went through a lot of stuff there, but I think it all comes down to we as law enforcement don't know how to train our own. And because we've never been taught, so we teach it the same way. I remember when I went back through my general instructor course, you know, 15, 18 years ago, whenever that was. And it was, hey, let's teach me a 2-minute presentation on how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Right. And then let's now the next time you do a 5-minute presentation on how to, I don't know, I think I did how to throw a baseball
Yeah,
and things like that. And then you're sitting there reading off of a PowerPoint because that's what every instructor has done before you. But we don't ever teach, especially police officers, how to actually teach other guys. And it goes back to not reading off the screen, teaching them how to debrief people because that's huge. That's a huge part, especially scenario based training, how to create scenarios and how to debrief them. Because we've all been through the scenario based training where the instructor is now debriefing us and he spends 10 minutes saying, you did this, this, instead of being like, okay, what did you do here? Or making them relive it, rethink through it. And that's actually how they learn. They're not going to remember 500 things that you just told them they did wrong. Like walk them through it, ask them the why, and let them start teaching it back. I think a lot of it too has to do with we build instructors into an instructor school without any experience. So now they can
yeah,
become an instructor, but you can't really be an instructor unless you had the experience. You know what to do, you know how to teach it based on how much you've screwed it up in the past. And unless you've actually done the job or actually done the thing you're trying to teach them, you're never going to be able to teach it correctly or have the answers to the whys when they start asking the questions.
right, right. That. Oh, go ahead, Bill.
No, it's just with what Jamie was saying. One of the biggest things that comes to mind for me is because this had happened recently. For firearms, we'll say. I see, working where I work, I see a plethora of different instructors come through to assist to keep their instructor hours current, right? So you get all types of folks that come through, and you're seeing them teach these brand new recruits how to shoot, and they're standing behind them, and they're either one berating them or two telling them things like, "Hey, just go easy on the trigger, smooth trigger press." But no, they don't tell them how. They don't show them like what right looks like. They're just saying the same things that were said to them when they started shooting. And if you do the qualification enough times, you're eventually going to get good at it. So it doesn't mean that you're a good shooter. And one of the biggest issues with law enforcement, with training, is the instructor courses don't teach you how to teach. They teach you how to do the same skill you're going there for, like firearms instructor school is just shooting a lot. Well, you should be showing up to that school having had shot a lot already and being competitive with your peers. But when you just go to these courses and just do the same thing a lot, that doesn't correlate to being able to teach. And the very simple example is hey, slow down on your trigger press without even showing them why or why they're having issues, or hey, look at this, finger overlays and all that sorts of stuff to like allow them to learn how and the why behind things. And like you said, the similes and the analogies that you can use to help us have them associate with something that they already know, is very important. And none of that stuff is taught in there. And the only reason that I have any sort of idea about it was I pursued it on my own, but I was taught a lot of it through like jujitsu down at Darcy in Arkansas and through the military in some aspects. And other than that, I would have no idea. I'd be just like every other instructor that was coming through the doors.
I think
Well,
you have to be a student first. You have to
Yeah.
understand it, and
yeah.
you don't have to necessarily master it because I don't think we ever master anything in our skills that we do. We just get better at them.
Mhm.
But unless you know the whys behind what you're doing, you're always going to say, "Hey." Slow down your trigger press. You're not going to understand what they're
Yeah.
actually doing wrong. Just regurgitate what you've heard before. You're exactly right.
Hmm.
Yeah. And by the way, Bill, E. Lundell 81 claims that you are an excellent teacher because he taught you how to be a teacher,
That
to be an
actually is
instructor.
true. He's an actual professor,
Yeah,
Professor Lindell. Yeah.
Professor
Yeah.
Lundell. So you've been, I told him affirmed. We do agree that you are quite the instructor. So, but yeah, that's, one of the things that I've noticed in a lot of the training is that they'll have my biggest pet peeve. So when I went through my instructor course, our instructor course was taught by law enforcement guys, but none of the stuff that we taught, none of the stuff that we had to create, none of the stuff that we had to improv was about law enforcement stuff. And it's like, well, it's to help you figure out how to do things, or it takes you out. It's like, if it's absolute learning science, that it has to be relevant. If you want it to stick, it has to be relevant. So one of the things I did is that, as y'all know, I'm a bit of a computer geek and all that. I was assigned that I had to do a 20-minute presentation on pins, PINS. I know what they were expecting, and it kind of pissed me off because I don't want to talk about the little metal sticky things. So when I got up and did my class, I did on personal identification numbers and talked about how to create strong passwords and stuff like that. They were super impressed. And but the thing that I really got from that is that, number one, I'm listening to 20 other guys doing presentations, and I don't give a rat's ass. I am so checked out. I am so bored. It's like, and Jamie can attest to this because he's designed his courses this way. If you have one person doing a scenario at a time, what happens to the other people who are waiting their turn? They're
Mm.
just sitting there staring off into business, or if they're like us, we're probably causing trouble and breaking things. But if you incorporate, like we want to, one of the things we want to do is train them on how to evaluate people, especially when it comes to scenarios. So why don't we teach them in the certification course how to create a rubric to evaluate someone's performance, and then use that rubric to evaluate everybody else's performance? Because now they're all learning something, they're all practicing, they're doing what we call training. They're actually doing training. And so there's so many different ways that we can incorporate how to develop instructors who are more than just managing classes and treating it as their own little ego boost. Because we all know the dudes who go get their instructor certs, and as soon as they, before the ink is dried on their certificate coming out of the bubble jet, they're already hanging their shingle as tactical lone wolf concepts, guild, whatever they want to call themselves. Not to diss on Guild Solutions; those guys are awesome. I was trying to find words to throw together, but but what experience do you have actually in teaching? What experience do you have as an instructor? So unless we build instructor courses, and they can be 1 week, 2 week, 3 weeks, the longer the better. It gives you more opportunities, give people time to actually practice dealing with behavioral aspects. Yeah, Apex Training's Concepts. What kind of a weird name is that? I'm watching the comments on the side. So, you know, if you're going to make it longer, don't just add more presentations, because all it does is have everyone else sitting there bored out of their skulls. Create opportunities to practice what you're teaching in class. Create scenarios. You can do scenario-based training in an instructor course.
Mhm.
The scenario is instruct. Matter of fact, in my one of my classes is classroom command. And in classroom command, I have people take two cards out of a deck. One's a red card, 1 through 10. One's a black card, 1 through 10. The red card is the order in which they present something. The black card is the behavioral issue they're going to demonstrate while that person is instructing. And then that person has to identify what it is and shut it down. But shut it down in a way that shows compassion. I'm not big in the word empathy because I don't know what everybody else is experiencing. Um, but with compassion, with professionalism, and treating them like adults.
I think that's a big part is treat them like adults. They're all adults. Don't be screaming and yell at them. And I think when I look at good instructors, when I looked at the people that I try to emulate as instructors, that's always what they did. Treat the people with respect. You're not screaming and yelling at them. Treat them like they're human beings. And then you'll get more out of your students that way too, as an instructor, because then they start buying into what you were actually teaching. I was just up in Colorado teaching a class, and uh, an officer walks in, and I can tell she didn't. It's not that she didn't want to be there, but she was scared because every other instructor had been screaming and yelling at her. So every time she went to training, she's like, "I hate this. I don't want to be here." But then you start treating them like with respect, and I'm like, "Hey, I want you to fail. I want you to make those mistakes." And that's okay. Then once she started realizing, hey, I'm not going to get berated, everything's going to be fine. She actually learned, and now has actually come down to one of my courses out in Arizona uh, a second time just because she liked the way that I taught. And you can do that in instructor courses too, is teach these guys, hey, you don't need to be screaming and yell at these guys if they mess up. Let them make the mistakes teaching and then correct them and help them understand how to be better instructors.
Yeah, it's um, if we're
Eh,
not. Oh, go ahead.
I was just also going to go back to what you said earlier too. You went through my class and letting people watch other people go and then let them evaluate, even in an instructor course. Now they're learning both sides of it. They're learning how to be a student, but then they're also learning where the mistakes were made so that they can see the mistakes that they made and then fix them from what other people. How am I trying to say this? When the people make the mistakes that they made, now they can see it from the other side and they understand how to correct it. Right. And I think you can do that in instructor courses as well. Like you are teaching, let them teach it, and then follow somebody back through and be like, okay, how can they fix this? And they learn from both sides, both teaching and evaluating. And then you're teaching them how to evaluate at the same time too.
Absolutely, absolutely.
With that, Jamie, another another good example that I found with that is in the DT realm, especially when we're creating new instructors and we're doing a course now and we're finishing it up probably this coming week. Yeah, this coming week is going to be towards the end of it. And what we see a lot in the legacy style training is that, the DT instructor would show something, someone gets it wrong, and then he's making them do push-ups, and you're getting smoked and hazed, and it's not the time and place for that. And then what you get is people that just become robots, and they'll do what you say because they're afraid of what you're going to do, but they don't do it because they truly understand it. And so, what we were seeing in this instructor course with the officer survival series is my coach says something that I really like. He's like, you got to show them something and let them play with it. Like a dog, go play with the ball and let them play with it for a little while and let them see what they get and what they can and can't do with it. And then you bring them back in and you make, the gross corrections and not these focus on these small details that a lot of new instructors do. Typically, what we see is the new instructors when they're teaching something to a new group is they'll just talk their way through the thing and not articulate why or how they're doing something. And there's no learning going on. There's just reciting their mental bandwidth and their mental process and what they are doing and not relaying that to the audience that they're supposed to be relaying it to. And the good follow up to that is what I think Rick was saying when it comes to I believe you were talking about like instructors that were like kind of abrasive and they might be disrespectful to students. And we used to see, still sometimes do in the DT world, someone will ask an oddball question. Well, what if he can touch your gun from this position? Or what if he has five friends with him? Some oddball question. And oftentimes they would just get you know, dismissed immediately or called dumb or something like that and shut up, told to shut up, which completely removes that student's mind from that course and they don't want any more part of being in that environment. They're just going to mentally shut off. And so what we've been seeing is that if you can treat that person respectfully, like and I think the Gracies had done a good job with this. One of the few things that they don't try and sell is validate and then correct and then validate at the end. So it's like, wow, thank you. That's a really great question. However, I'm focusing on this right now. If you want, we can discuss it after class. But I really like the way that you phrase that, and so you leave that person not with disdain or malice towards you. You just leave them with, oh, he thinks I have a good question, but I'm just going to ask him later. And then they're going to be back into the course material, as opposed to just calling them stupid, dismissing them, and then having them not want to mentally participate in the class anymore. I think that's super important, and not just DT, in any aspect that any instructor is trying to teach. If you're not respecting your students, and if you treat them like babies, they're going to act like babies. You got to
Mhm.
treat them like grown ass adults, like they are, which is really important. And you have to treat them like you're their peer, because you are, in a sense. And by doing that, it removes that I'm better than you mentality, and that your performance is going to speak for itself. You don't have to wear the red shirt for everyone to know that you're awesome.
And to that, one of the things that you can always tell an instructor who's not aware of his people, because one of the biggest issues with, if you shame one person in that class, you've just made it an us them. You've lost the
Yeah.
entire class.
Hmm.
If you, because they don't see you as correcting bad behavior, they don't see you as correct or helping somebody. They see you as a big ego just trying to throw your weight around. But if you co-opt that person, if you, for instance, if somebody is a smartass in your class and you have a long-running class, I did this in one of the police classes I was teaching at community college. I had a veteran, a female veteran, who'd just come back from Iraq. She'd seen combat and all that, and she was a real wise ass. But I'm in a class of 40 or 50, and she was just an instinctual leader. And I was impressed with how good of a leader she was, but she was making smart ass comments and I would lose the class very quickly. So after the second week of this, I took her aside before class started, not in the middle class or anything like that. As she was walking, I was like, hey, can I talk to you for a second? She said, sure. I took her aside and said, look, I really appreciate you in my class. Do you understand how much of a leader you really are? She's like, what do you mean? I said, people are following you. People are watching you. People respect you. You are a natural leader. You make a lot of comments in the class. I appreciate that. Sometimes they're a bit smart ass, and that really takes the class away, and I lose traction with them. If you could help me maintain the class by showing good leadership in the class, that would help me a lot too. The rest of she was amazing for the rest of the semester. Anytime somebody started making a smart ass comment, she's like, "Hey, you're being disrespectful to the professor." Shut down everything. And I never lost the class again. Because I didn't shame her. I didn't jump her. It's like, you want to keep saying smart ass comments? You can leave my office.
Yep.
I've seen that happen in
Mhm.
colleges. I've seen that happen in police schools. I've seen it happen everywhere. But if you isolate that person, you talk to him as an adult, you don't only gain that person as an ally for your leadership of the class, you've also won the class. Because if that person who's the leader in the class is now listening to you and following your lead, the rest of the class is going to pick that up too. But you see so many guys who will come in and they'll start barking at people, or someone is picking on. There's always that one person in the class who's awkward, that doesn't fit in. You guys might not know that experience. That's been me pretty much my entire life. And there's some Billy badass instructor hones in on who the group thinks is weak or who the group thinks is awkward, and then they chime in with the rest of the class, and they become part of the bully pit in harassing that person. I've seen so many people just disappear out of classes, disappear out of law enforcement because they were just constantly bullied. And instead of having an instructor stand up and embrace that person and give that person an opportunity to shine, you do a lot more. You get that respect, you get that trust, you get that credibility from the class. And when you have that, you get far greater accomplishment in transferring knowledge and skills.
Sounds like you're talking about leadership a little bit.
Why would I ever talk about that? So, if the segue into that, showing leadership in training, and I've said this in the corporate world, I've said it in law enforcement. I honestly 100% believe that any promotion, any leadership, any rank gain has to go through training first. And I don't mean they have to be trained to be a leader. I mean they have to be an instructor. If you have somebody who's not capable of managing a classroom, being able to mentor people, help develop people, answer questions, and lead people to greatness, they're not going to do that in their rank. I've known every single great instructor I have known has been a great leader. And I have never seen a bad instructor become a good leader. I've never seen it happen. And there might be one exception out in the wild somewhere. I have yet to meet him, but I honestly believe that if we could change the paradigm, and just to let you know, it hasn't happened in the corporate world either. But if we could start inculcating the idea, if we could start implanting the idea that in order to be promoted to any kind of rank, it's not that you just have an instructor certification. It's that you are an actual instructor with verified and performance evaluations as an instructor that gets peer review and not just smile sheets. I think you would see a revolutionary change in a lot of law enforcement administration because now you're putting in a whole bunch of leaders who know how to mentor, who know how to handle poor behavior, who know how to encourage people, find the bridges, which is what a metaphor or simile is. And we would have a completely different style of leadership in law enforcement.
It's interesting you talk about just the law enforcement, or sorry, the leadership and instructor. When I look at the instructors that I've respected the most, they have the same exact traits as the leaders that I've respected the most. They're the ones that are humble. They're the ones that know the material, that have done the job, and they know what to do, and so you can trust them. And they're the ones that are going to have your back when shit hits the fan. The leaders are going to be there for you. It's the same with the instructor. You start to make mistakes, a good instructor is going to be there. Hey, I got you. I'm going to help you through this. We're going to help you get better. They're the ones that are respectful to the students, just like a good leader is. And so all the same traits that you have as a leader or as an instructor apply to that leadership role. And so I agree with that. I think that should be a more that should be something that is pushed more in law enforcement. You have to, in order to be a leader, you have to be an instructor that's one level or another.
Yeah, if you look, I mean, let's take like your basic patrol unit, for example. Like you're a patrol cop and you're looking to get promoted to sergeant. You take a test, you do an oral board, and then you don't mess up or get written up for a little while, and you place in the top four, and they pick the first four people, you're getting promoted to sergeant. You went from having zero delegatory responsibilities and oversight over individuals to now you're in charge of the entire shift. And when you're an instructor and you have to go to the basic instructor course and do all that stuff. But really, what you should be doing is then developing curriculum and how do you deliver it? And you got to plan it and you got to execute it and you got to improve it for the next time. And you got to see what tasks on your mission essential task list need to get accomplished this fiscal or calendar year and execute those things appropriately and not miss these deadlines. That's a really good way to show somebody the importance of being there for your people because by being that instructor and taking care of those tasks, you are doing it for them, not necessarily for you. And if you do that well and you get your like your performance evaluated not only by your peers but by the people that you teach, so like you have an end of course critique or you have an AAR or whatnot, what have you about your class that you taught, you use those in conjunction with your performance eval to go towards that promotion. And in a perfect world, that would really weed out a lot of people because there's agencies where I've been to where there's people in leadership positions that never taught anything ever. And it's like, how are you going to manage a department of people that are supposed to do things by policy and law, and you have no idea on how they learn it? You just show up, you sign the sign-in sheet, and you leave because you're a chief and nobody's going to say anything to you. And I think that's a really good step to develop a leader and not just throw them to the wolves. And some people learn and some won't. But it's such I never really even thought about it until you had brought it up the other day. But I don't even know of a better way to do that promotional process than to go through that because you're really going to know how you are. And it reminds me of a quote that one of my mentors had told me a while back. He said, in the military, he said, "You'll never know how good of a leader you were until you leave, and you get phone calls from the guys that came before you, or I'm sorry, came after you. And the same in law enforcement, you leave departments and stuff like that, or you go somewhere else, or you're not in that position anymore. People are seeking your guidance because they respected you and they develop and they progress. That's a direct reflection of your ability to teach and your ability to lead. And yeah, law enforcement misses the mark, I think, with it largely.
I look at it, training units. You're exactly right. Like you look at training units, they are the leaders of those younger officers.
Mhm.
They are the ones that are teaching them how to become cops. They're teaching them in the advanced officer training how to improve their skill set. And without a good leadership background, you can't, without a good leadership background, you can't teach that stuff. So you have to be a good leader before you are, or a good instructor before you're a leader. I was thinking about it, just popped into my mind. Rick, one of your first, not one of your first posts, but one of your earlier posts when you started your page talked about how a training unit should be a specialty unit.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And I believe that 100%. Like you have to have a certain skill set to be an instructor. I was curious, I was just thinking about it. What are some things that you guys think would be requirements for that specialty unit for a training unit?
Well, I actually was consulting for like 2 minutes a large city in Canada about creating an instructor apprenticeship program where people who want to be instructors, or better yet, the instructors in the cadre already identify people they think would be instructors and they invite them in. And they go through an apprenticeship program where they learn all the scut work of being an instructor, like, how to be a role player, how to, managing time, cleaning all the crap up after people leave, that kind of stuff. They go through the scut work, but they're put through little classes instead of a 1 week course of fire hosing, then dropped into it. They go through apprenticeship program that they have to go through different classes. They're learning bit by bit chunks of what it takes to be an instructor, and then they have that role for X amount of time. And then when an instructor position opens, they go through a selection process, just like anybody else. If they were in the apprenticeship program and they sucked, sorry, bud, you can stay in the apprenticeship program if you like. You might need a little bit more work, or we don't see a path forward for you. Sorry. But if they do cut, then they go through the actual instructor development programs where they learn how to become an instructor and they get instructor certified. The problem with that is that there's the whole chicken egg, situation.
Mm.
You have to have standards, and those standards have to be put into SOPs, and those standards then have to be factored into an evaluation, and then everyone on the cadre has to pass that evaluation, and that's one of the primary reasons you'll have a hard time pushing it, because all the dudes who are comfortable in the instructor train in the training cadre right now, who are getting away with just breathing and having a certificate, are not going to want that program because that means that
Mhm.
they're going to have to perform. Just as we know, school resource officers, instructors, and evidence clerks are usually the magnets for the lazy. And I'm not saying that means that all SROs and all instructors and evidence clerks are, but when we want to retire somebody on duty, where do they go? They
Yep.
go into one of those kind of things. So the goal is to eliminate, and I talk about that in the book, is that you start by what you guys are doing already, and you're raising up the next crop of instructors. You're showing them those standards, and as they start coming in, you become the training leader without actually making it a thing. And then when you have a majority of guys who have the same philosophy, now you can start pushing for SOPs to be created to document and canonize the doctrine of the training cadre. That's where your standards and evaluations come through, and then you work together as a team to figure out what that evaluation rubric looks like, and then each one of you goes through it, and you have to take the results. You have to accept it. So if I created the training team and I go through the evaluation and everyone says I suck, I might be kicked out of the training cadre, and I have to be willing to take that. We have to be George Washington at this point. I will be president for as long as it needs to be, but if it's not, I'm not going to be your king. I'm not the king here. I can be voted out. And that's about the only way that you'll be able to really start setting that up. Now, one of the big arguments you get, I was talking about this apprenticeship program with a large, city in Canada, but you can do this just like there's regional SWAT teams, create a regional instructor cadre. The biggest problem you're going to have out of all of that is convincing your admin that if an instructor doesn't pass the evaluation and they're no longer part of the training cadre, they are no longer certified to train in your agency or at the academy. It has to result in the yanking of a certificate.
I'm glad you mentioned that because we have so many instructors out there that keep their certs that don't ever do anything with it and then don't keep up on their skill set. And we're seeing that in Arizona with firearms training. And we are telling people, hey, if you can't pass this course of fire, you're not fit to be an instructor.
Oh
And
yeah.
Rick, you came to one of our recent instructor courses that we were putting on, and I give got to give credit to one of our guys, Ryan, out here, who's doing great work with the instructor programs, is he's really come in and said, hey, if you're not cutting it, you're not going to get the cert. There
Yeah.
has to be a standard. And if you aren't cutting it, you don't know the material and you can't do it, you definitely can't teach it.
Hmm.
So I'm not going to give you a cert just because you went through the course.
I
And
would. Oh, go
we have to
ahead.
hold those people to the higher standard. We have to hold instructors to a high standard and be willing to say, you're not cutting it anymore. You're no longer an instructor.
Ryan had told me after they took that first iteration up to Flagstaff, because he's doing something I've been talking about a long time too, is
Hmm.
validating before implementing. They're
Yep.
validating it in different regions of Arizona, and there were some people who were pissed off when they were told you can't come back. There are people who are pissed off at the small unit tactics class that y'all are putting out that can't pass it, who aren't going to be teaching that course, and they're not certified to teach that course.
And there's lots of people when we got rid of the high risk vehicle instructor for the small team tactics course that, hey, you're no longer a high risk vehicle instructor. We're not doing this anymore. And they were upset. Now you have to go back through this other course to prove that you can still teach and that you understand this newer material because it's basic stuff. You should know it. We've just added to it. And
Yeah.
so I got to commend Ryan for that, for really
That's
pushing
awesome.
that on our end.
Yeah, and it's. I love the fact that Arizona, by the way, anybody watching, Arizona is doing an amazing job at changing the culture of training and changing how instructor development is being done. I would strongly recommend anybody contact Brian Clark and Jamie Gissel for talking about what's happening in Arizona. I went through and I saw what they were doing. The fact that you can lose your cert, that they can say no and fail somebody, that's huge. I think
We
that
fail
most people,
somebody, at least one person every course.
yeah,
That's so awesome.
yeah. I think they were saying that there are over 9,000 instructors in Arizona. 9,000 instructors. That's more than the entire number of sworn officers of Phoenix.
Yeah.
And Phoenix is the largest city. How are there more instructors than the entire PD of Phoenix? But that's
And
the thing is
maybe
that,
200 teach.
yeah, and maybe 200 teach. The others 8,800 have their own training organization, have their
Hmm.
own training, and they're out there teaching people how to shoot the ground when they're doing the practical shooting. But
Yeah.
so that's one of the things that we have to look at, and you can see the failure trickle down that if you don't have leadership in training, if you don't cut certs and start making sure that, yeah, we're going to be elitist here. There's, SEAL team, they're elitist. They don't take everybody. Green Berets, even Rangers, even 11 Bravos. If you can't carry, if you can't be, I'm sorry, for Bill's sake, the 0311s. The 03, if you can't cut it as an 0311 or 11 Bravo, you have no business in the on the battlefield. They will put you into your job now is to paint stripes on parking lots, right? If we can't start setting the standards as instructors, how are we going to hold basic cops to
Mhm.
standards? If we got a fat instructor who can't run, how are we going to tell the basic cops you can't be fat and you have to run?
Rick, we got a question from somebody
Oh,
that messaged me from Jeff Hogan. He said, unfortunately, so many people sent to get certified as leaders have almost no institutional knowledge or field experience. How do you change the culture to demand instructors have experience? I think it was kind of relevant to what we were just talking about.
I'm going to let you two talk about it because you're in it right now. You're seeing it right now.
Go for it, and I'll follow up.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the first thing to go off right what we were talking about is like, how can you teach something that you can't do? I think the first step, Rick, you had mentioned about like having a specialized unit for training and some of the prereqs that come in. Like, what would you have prerequisites for that unit? And the first thing that came to my mind was you need to have the technical skill in the area that you're trying to go for in that specialized unit. And then with that, you should have references from people that are respected in the community to vouch for you and your ability and your personality style. And then you have to show some form of dedication to that craft, right? And then that should, get you a ticket to come clean up the classroom and stuff afterwards and get little nuggets from people. But if you don't have the ability to do, you have no business being able to teach someone. And I think there's a missing link with that here because what people will say to playing devil's advocate is they'll say, well, I for firearms instructor, I passed the course of fire, like I passed the qual. So why would I not be able to do that? I was like, well, you should be able to pass the qual because you're a cop. In fact, the qualifications that we have are laughable. So
It's the minimum
there's no
standard.
the minimum standard, and qualification is not training. And if you can't show me that you've pushed yourself beyond that, and that is where your pinnacle of performance lies, you don't have any business and you don't have the ability to bring somebody up to or past where you are. It's different when you look at like, because then people will compare it to like college sports. Well, the coach doesn't play anymore. Well, the coach, I guarantee you, the coach has had years and years and years of experience and probably a bunch of knee surgeries and stuff. And he's had the experience. So now he can convey the information. There's no way that you're going to get a college or a professional football coach that never played football before or just played once in high school, coaching a team and teaching people how to run plays and things like that. That's not going to happen. I think the groundwork, the base fundamental of technical skill, but not even skill, but the ability to surpass the standards and be well above the mark than your average person is not only like looked, not only a goal, but should be a requirement.
For sure.
Yeah.
Let's look at firearms instructors. Yeah, just passing the qual doesn't mean anything,
Mm-mm.
right? You have to be able to perform at a higher level. And I don't want just a basic minimum instructor teaching brand new officers. Like I think about it, who would I want teaching my son if he was in the police academy or if he was on the street as who do I want teaching them? Do I want somebody that doesn't train, that doesn't keep up on their skills, that isn't continuing to be a student teaching my kid how to become a cop? No, I want people that have had the experience, that have failed over and over again and understand the mistakes that are made. I remember when I first got out to our training unit, right after I got there, there was another position that opened up, and I said, "Hey, let's go after this guy. Let's start recruiting these couple guys." And they're like, "Well, they're not planning on being here for very long." And they said, "We need to bring somebody here because it takes 2 or 3 years to train them up." I said, "It shouldn't take any time to train up an instructor. We should be able to bring somebody over right now and teach a class tomorrow." Because if they're going to be instructing, they have to understand how to do the job, and they may not understand how things work within the training unit, but I know that I could call that person tomorrow, and guess what? They could teach the class and have zero issues doing it. And I think that's where we have failed in law enforcement and instructor cadres. And Rick mentioned it earlier. It's usually the people that want to get off the street. The testing process is super easy as long as you know some policies and can recite a couple different things, you're on the list because people don't want to leave their specialty units. I think that
Mhm.
the training unit should be not necessarily where people go to die, but people that have had experience that want to continue to pass on the information and teach people from the mistakes that they've made, and not just people that want to get out of patrol. It has to be someone who has a desire to continue to improve law enforcement as a whole and try to help teach these young guys how to be better cops.
Going with that, oh, sorry, Rick.
Oh no, I just you said something that it totally triggered a freaking soundbite. Instead of having people go there to die, you want people who want to go there to grow.
Mhm.
That's the key. Is we need people who want to grow because they know they don't know everything and they're so hungry for knowledge and they're so hungry for perfection. They want to become instructors because they know that by teaching it and honing their skill and being ready for class, it's going to make them better at their
Mhm.
craft as well. So I really like that soundbite, and I want to jump on that. Instead of being a place to go to die, it's go to grow. I'm not saying it very well. I'm not very articulate, but y'all get what I'm saying. Go
I think
ahead,
it's
Bill.
good. No, it's Jamie's also sparked an idea for me too. Well, not necessarily an idea, but a memory from a speech that I heard someone give. And the culture within that instructor cadre is very important too. And one thing that I've always found that I've been attracted to is when I'm around a group of instructors that really push me to the point where it's almost uncomfortable because I know that if I mess up, I'm gonna disappoint them. If I don't perform to the level that I know that I can do and to the level that they expect. And that pressure is important. And I heard Matt Larson, who's the lead instructor of at West Point for combatives in wrestling, and he came to the academy a couple. I've spoken to him a bunch of times, but he gave a speech one time, and he's talking about why do military units go on PT runs every morning at 05. And people in the class would say, for fitness and this and that. He's like, yeah, but it is an unofficial way to establish a pecking order within the unit because nobody wants to be the person that falls out of that run. So people will train their balls off, if not to be a good runner, to not be the shitbag that falls out and is the last person behind. And it's got the platoon sergeant or the CO screaming at them for not being able to keep up. And that type of mentality for instructor cadre needs to be there. Us holding each other accountable and not just once you get it, you forget it, and then you don't have to prove yourself anymore. Mainly like on the SWAT teams, like you got to earn your spot every single year. And one day, if you don't make it, and too bad, so sad. Like you don't deserve to be here anymore because you can't meet the standard, whether it's PT shooting or whatnot. And I think that mentality is what will keep those units the way that they are and is going to deter people that don't have that mentality from going there. Just like you said, Rick, was that is where you'll grow and not die. Super important because if you do everything right with the selection process, and then you have people in this unit and they don't, they just relax and think they start coasting, and we're going to get back to square one. So that ongoing pressure amongst your
Yeah,
peers, I think, is very important.
yeah.
I look back to our SWAT team. Sorry, Rick, real quick.
No, you're
I look
fine.
back at our SWAT team, and we had a policy that in our policy it said you can be removed from the team for any reason or no reason at all.
Mm,
And I think that should apply to instructor cadres as well. If
yeah.
you're not pulling your weight, if you're not stepping up to teach, if you're not continuing to grow as an instructor, like you shouldn't be part of it. And it shouldn't be a place where somebody's there for 10, 15 years and not doing anything. They have to continue to hone in their craft. I spent 16 years on our team trying to hone my craft to be a SWAT guy. Now I'm over at our training unit. Now my craft is teaching and
Yeah.
instructing. So now I'm going to spend my time honing my craft on becoming a better instructor because that's what's going to help push this next generation of officers to be better.
Yeah, you got to grow or go, one way or
Ooh,
the
that's
other.
a good one.
Yeah. It's one thing that I will say when you were talking about like requirements or what would you look for. The absolute most useless and ridiculous standard for anybody being considered is how many years you've been doing the job,
Oh yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
like I see so many agency. Well, you have to be in the agency for 2 years before you can be an instructor. Well, what if I get So I kind of and I have a specific way about this because I had been teaching and training for 7 years before I became a cop, and in my first 8 months of being on the road, independent patrol, I went to New York for 9/11, came home, and my captain took me aside and they said, "We've been watching you, we've been seeing your work, and we're going to send you to two schools and you get to choose the third." So I hadn't even been an independent patrol for a year yet when they sent me to an instructor school. And that pissed off a lot of dudes. There were a lot of dudes who were like, well, what makes you better than us? Number one, I didn't ask to go to this. I was told I was going to this. I was told I'm going to FTO school and I'm going to go to a general instructor school. And I got to choose the third class I wanted, which was SWAT basic. And they saw that it, and I asked them later on, why did you do that? And they said, well, we know your background, but we also saw how you immediately took on the new guys and helped them figure stuff out. We saw how you volunteered to take bites from the K9 unit and you had no interest in being K9. That really impressed the K9 guys. The SWAT team commander asks you to go to his training, not because you want to be on SWAT, but because you want to see how they shoot. And they say that you're sitting there studying and observing. That tells us that you're going to be a good instructor. And I was surprised that that was seen. I wasn't doing any of that to be an instructor. I was more than happy to follow policy. I'm a policy follower, and I was willing to wait my turn and do what it takes. But I made the effort on my own time without pay to insert myself in these things because I wanted to know. I started training with the canine units because I want to know how I should, as a patrol officer or patrol deputy, how I should behave around a canine. What do you want me to do, Mr. Canine Operator? Oh, well, I want you to do this, this, and this. So I would go to training every week. Then I go to the training with the SWAT team. What would you want me to do as basic deputy? What's my role? What am I supposed to do? They'd never had anybody come and ask those questions before. So I showed them that I wanted to learn. So I didn't have to wait the 2 years. It pissed off the guys who had to wait 2 years, but that's what we were talking about, is if people are demonstrating a thirst and a hunger for knowledge and an attempt to grow and be better, those are the people that we want. We want the naturally curious people, the naturally fearful of, I don't want to let people down. I'm not afraid of
Yeah.
much. I'm afraid of letting you, Bill, and you, Jamie, and all the people on my Instagram page, I'm afraid of letting them down. I was afraid this book was going to be a total piece of shit. That was my biggest fear, that nobody, people read it and say, oh, this is trash. I don't want that. I don't care what people think about me. I care about what the right people think about me. And if those are the people that we want as instructors, not who are going to go into a classroom and say, worship me, I have the instructor cert, but the people who go in and say, I've made a lot of mistakes, let me show you how not to make mine.
Mhm.
And then let me show you what to do when you make your own mistakes and how to fix them. Number one, integrity. Own the damn thing. So anyway, that's my last piece.
Rick, I do have a follow up for you from Jeff about the question where he asked, how do you change the culture to demand instructors have experience? And we spoke about it. And then he just messaged me. He said, quick follow up. Smart department leaders seek out accreditation for their agencies. It's a way to ensure that there are at least minimum standards. CALIA has a very specific standard for required documented requirements for instructors for competency and ongoing competency assessment by subject matter expertise. What you would probably be better to address that?
Well, that's a big can of worms because I could say a lot about the perception. My agency went through an accreditation. It was not CALIA. They went through Virginia's Law Enforcement Accreditation Council. Um, the, I absolutely agree that there needs to be accreditation. My observation is that a lot of agencies, when they say when an accrediting body shows up and says, "Here's all the stuff you have to have," that agency then takes all that stuff, changes the names, implements it, drops 400 pages of document on your page, sign a document saying, "I've received and I understand the new SOP." In the 3 minutes, you've had that 500 pages, 400 or 500 pages, and now they meet accreditation standards. They don't follow it until it's time to recertify. And so that's one of the things I really like about IAD lists, the International Association of Directors of Law Enforcement Standards and Training. Um, they um, they have an accreditation system that is not about just checking the boxes. It's about here's material to help you grow and implement. They do. IADLIS does post and academy accreditations. I'm part of the assessment team now, and that's one of the things I love about going through their accreditation is that it's not about checking boxes. It's about demonstrating that not only do you have these standards, but also demonstrating that people are following them and they want to follow them. We want to see improvement and we want to see people competing to be better than they were before. So until we have law enforcement accreditation that looks at what are meeting minimum standards, we already do that. That's why we are where we're at. I want to see accreditation that says, here's the basic standard, here's the standard that's going to change the culture of your agency. We want you to meet that one. But if you meet minimum standards and you get the little icon, you get a little, plastic thing to hang on your desk. But I want to see accreditation standards increase to where they're not just checking boxes, they're finding the agencies that want to do what we expect instructors to do, which is improve and change. I don't know if I answered the question, but that's
Yeah, I think it was more. I think it was more of a statement on his part, but yeah, I agree with that. And you know, at least what I saw from my first agency, when accreditation folks will come to evaluate for CALIA, they'll do a couple ride-alongs, and a couple weeks before they know they're coming, they're going to make sure people put certain things in their reports.
Hmm.
And hey, make sure you put in your report that you seatbelted your prisoner in the car number or whatever, something that most folks weren't doing every day. And then
yeah,
magically you have to do that. And then after they leave, then no one's sending back your reports because you didn't put in that everything about putting the prisoner in with their seatbelt on and their double handcuffs, doing a lot of extra things that aren't normally done. Not that I don't agree with putting those things in reports, but that they were never enforced up until they realized the accreditation guy's coming.
It's almost
So
like the
yeah, I agree
accreditation
with that.
guys are just a checkbox
Oh
when
yeah,
when they're
weird.
showing up. Hey, make sure we check all the boxes, and that's really
Yeah.
yeah,
all it is.
yeah. That's one thing I like about IADLIS is that we would go in and randomly ask for records. They'd say, well, we have these
Uh,
contracts for instructors. We have these are our standards. All right, give me the list of instructors. I want to see this guy's record. I want to see all of his documentation. Okay, and they drag it out. Now we want to see the last 5 years of these records, that kind of thing. Then we randomly take students aside and say, what are the if something happens on the range, what are you allowed to do? What are the range safety rules, that kind of stuff. And take the instructors aside. And what are you going to do if somebody does this? We do a lot of quizzing and asking on the spot improv type stuff.
That's
The
what I
other
should
thing
have
I
done.
was gonna say is that Bill, you and I have talked about this, and Jamie and I are working on this. Is just because an agency has minimum standards doesn't mean that they have to stay with minimum standards. If you have higher standards than minimum and make those your standards, you've met minimum standards, but you've also improved it. Now, a
mhm.
lot of agencies that get sued saying, well, the minimum standards say this, so I only need to pass that. If they just made arguments based on our research, observation, and analysis, we've determined that even though these are the state minimum standards, in order to perform the job, you have to meet these standards, and that's why we have them. If they came with a body of data and evidence, then those standards would stay. But they don't
And I
do that.
and I think with that too, once other agencies start like my next door neighbor agency, if we have a higher standard, they're like, well, now we need to meet that agency's standard because
Mhm.
we don't want to be the ones that are doing the minimum standard. So what's that going to do? You look at firearms quals, like we've talked about with this Ryan, with my buddy Ryan all the time. Get rid of the qual altogether. Have a minimum standard for the qual, but don't make it like let the agencies now make their own qual, because then you're going to see agencies step up their game because hey,
Yeah.
we have the hardest qual, and guess what? We get everybody past it because we have good instructors, and it goes back to building that instructor cadre.
Yes. When I was in academy, I was talking to a guy who was nervous because he wasn't doing really well. He's like, I'm worried my agency is going to fire me because I'm getting low scores on tests. I'm like, dude, one thing I've learned in this class, there's always going to be an agency with lower standards that will take anyone.
Yeah.
So just go to that agency. Some people don't test well. If you get bounced, go to another agency that will take you. there are two types of agencies: the go-to agency and the stepping stone agency. We all know who those agencies are in every place that
Yep.
we've worked. I was very fortunate that my agency started out as a stepstone agency, but by the time I left, they were the go-to agency because we had a sheriff that gave a shit, and we had administration who was motivated to improve and modernize our agency.
I want to touch on one thing real quick because I know we're short on time, but I had a thought when we were talking about the instructor. How do you build better instructors? When Rick came through my course a couple months ago and did the review of the course and the course evaluation, he was very detailed on each level, whether evaluating me as an instructor, the course design, and the documentation. I think if we took your evaluation for instructors and made that our standard
Ooh,
amongst our agencies, like, hey, you can't instruct unless you can pass all these things. And that's our standard. Let the people teach and we evaluate their course based on your standards that you put in there. I think that would automatically raise the standard of the instruction in law enforcement.
I appreciate that.
yeah, I
And
think so too.
it's always growing. As you know, when I first went through it, I was like, my rubric's broken. We worked
Mhm.
together and got it fixed. Anybody who wants to see what that rubric is, it's published. It's on my website. There's no secrets. It's all transparent. You can go to letneck.com, go to the training evaluation program, and you can see the process that Jamie and I went through. Other companies have stepped up and have volunteered their companies for additional validations. I'm working on that. I'm working on getting paid so I can actually work on going to these trainings and evaluations. But anybody who wants to see that rubric, it's available for review. Thank you for
Just
that
to
plug.
Yeah, well, I was going to give you one more too, which is directly tied into your standards that we were talking about. So for the listeners that aren't aware, I was working on rebuilding a use of force class, and so working with Rick, the minimum requirements, goals, and objectives that are there are very meek at best. It's describe this, define this, and there's not a lot of do or analyze or demonstrate type of things. And so I'm not allowed to change those. However, I can meet those, like you said, by creating a higher form of that performance skill. And by doing that, I was able to really step up the quality of instruction by getting them to do hands-on and evaluate them. And that encompasses so many of those very basic skills that were discussed and that are mandated. So for the folks that are saying, it might be, oh, I can't do it because I can't change the goals and objectives. They have to get voted on and this and that. You don't necessarily have to change it. By improving it, you're
You're meeting
including
it.
them in everything else. The problem is it's a lot of work and it's not going to be easy, and you're going to have failures and you have setbacks, and you're going to do beta classes and they're going to go shitty, and that's okay. And that's what the whole point of it. So I really want to bring that up because talking with you, if I hadn't done that or like looked at the book, even all of the templates that you have on the website, there's no excuse for people to not look at improving their stuff when they could download the PowerPoint template and the instructor guide stuff and literally plug and play their information into there. Make sure the student guide, instructor guides line up, do your test, all that stuff. Like it's if you have the material, it's very doable with your book and the resources on your website. I couldn't speak to it enough and I've only been working with you, what, 6 months maybe?
I think
Not even.
two, three.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a
We had
lot
our first
less. Yeah.
conversation was in August when we started talking about this. So
And
like two or
yeah.
three
So
months, man.
it hasn't been long, and it's man, it's improved a lot. So for folks listening, I couldn't recommend it enough.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Cool.
I think that was a good one.
Yeah. Well,
We could talk about that for hours, like
Yeah.
probably.
yeah. I mean, everything that we're talking about, we could talk about for hours, but we try to keep these down to like an hour, no more than an hour and a half. There's plenty of
Yeah.
long form podcasts that people can listen to. And just to let people know, if you've made it this far, we are posting clips, and we are going to be posting these lives on the YouTube channel, YouTube /at letnet, letne Consultants, I believe it is. I'll post a link on my Instagram page. But Bill and Jamie have been doing a ridiculously great job of using software I've never heard of to take out a lot of my weird tonalities and ums and ahs. But we're posting a lot of clips as well as the long form. We'll get that link available to y'all soon. And as always, if you have questions, reach out to each one of us. All three of us. The reason we've gotten together and we're buds now is because we're constantly talking to each other about how to improve. There are people like this. This is the army that we're building, and it's a lot of fun. It's just a lot of fun. Thank you, Dedicated Threat Solutions. It's my buddy Scott.
All right, boys. We'll talk to you
Yeah.
next time.
Thanks,
All right,
guys.
y'all have a good night, good weekend.
Bye.
Bye.
You too.